The small town of Millbrook, Pennsylvania sits nestled between rolling hills and thick forests. Population just over 8,000. The kind of place where everyone knows everyone, where secrets don't stay secret for long, and where small minds have a way of making big judgments about people. Sarah Mitchell grew up here. She was born and raised on the edge of town, where her father worked as a mechanic and her mother cleaned houses for the wealthier families on the hill. Sarah was what people in Millbrook called the quiet one. She didn't go to the big parties. She didn't date the football players or join the cheerleading squad. Instead, she worked part-time at the grocery store, helped her parents with bills, and spent her evenings reading books about military history and watching documentaries about special operations forces. By the time Sarah turned 17, the judgment had already begun. It started small. At Millbrook High School, the popular girls would whisper when she walked by in her donated clothes and worn-out sneakers. The football team, led by a senior named Marcus Webb, made it their mission to make fun of her in the hallways. They called her Princess because she didn't respond to their insults. She didn't cry. She didn't fight back. She just kept walking, kept her head down, kept moving forward. "Try not to cry, Princess," Marcus would say, usually while his friends laughed around him. The nickname stuck, and not in a good way. But what Marcus and his friends didn't understand was that Sarah wasn't weak. She wasn't crying because she was scared or sad. She was quiet because she was focused. She had a plan, and their small-town cruelty was nothing compared to the challenges she knew were coming. Sarah's dream was simple and clear: she wanted to join the Navy. Not just the Navy, she wanted to become a Navy SEAL. She wanted to be part of something bigger than Millbrook, Pennsylvania. She wanted to prove that a girl from a poor family, from a small town, from nothing, could become one of the best warriors in the world. Her guidance counselor, Mrs. Harrison, was the only adult who believed in her. Everyone else discouraged her. Her own father sat her down one evening and said, "Sarah, honey, I love you, but this is a dream for other people. People with advantages. People from families like the Webbs and the Hendersons." But Sarah had something her father didn't have. She had defiance wrapped in quiet determination. During her senior year, while Marcus and his friends were worried about prom dates and college parties, Sarah was waking up at 4 a.m. to run 5 miles before school. She was doing pull-ups on the chin-up bar in her garage. She was reading military strategy books and watching videos of Navy SEAL training. She was preparing for something real. The summer before she enlisted, Marcus saw Sarah at the town pool. She was there with some of her mother's clients. She was babysitting their kids for money. Marcus swam over with 2 of his friends, and they started their usual routine. Comments about her body. Comments about her poverty. Questions designed to humiliate her in front of the children. Sarah didn't react. She helped the children out of the water, wrapped them in towels, and walked away. But inside, something shifted. Not anger. She was past anger. What she felt was clarity. Every insult, every cruel word, every moment of being belittled was fuel. She was going to show all of them. Not because she hated them, but because she loved herself enough to become something extraordinary. When Sarah turned 18, she walked into the Navy recruitment office in Harrisburg without telling anyone in her family. The recruiter, a tough woman named Sergeant Lopez, looked at her application and her test scores and asked her one question: "Are you serious about this?" "More serious than I've ever been about anything," Sarah said. Sergeant Lopez smiled. "Then you might actually have a shot." Sarah enlisted that day. When she told her parents, her mother cried. Not sad tears, proud tears. Her father hugged her for the first time in years. The Millbrook High School was already sending out graduation announcements, but Sarah's was different. Sarah Mitchell, it read, would not be attending college in the fall. She would be reporting to Naval Base Great Lakes in Illinois for basic training. The news spread through town quickly. At the grocery store, some people congratulated her. Others shook their heads and whispered that it wouldn't last. That a girl like her couldn't make it. That she was setting herself up for failure. But the person Sarah was most interested in the reaction of was Marcus Webb. 2 weeks before she left for basic training, she ran into him at the local diner. He was with his father, who owned one of the largest real estate development companies in the region. Marcus was wearing designer clothes and talking loudly about his father's plan to send him to an Ivy League school. Marcus noticed Sarah and called her over. "Hey, princess," he said, that cruel smile spreading across his face. "I heard you joined the military. That's actually perfect for you. You're not going to have much luck finding a boyfriend, so at least you'll have something to do." His father laughed. Marcus's friends, sitting in nearby booths, laughed too. Sarah looked at Marcus for a long moment. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She didn't react with anger. Instead, she said something that would echo in Marcus's mind for the next 9 years. "I joined to become a Navy SEAL, Marcus. I know that's probably a concept you can't understand, working hard for something you actually want. But one day, when I'm serving my country and doing things that matter, I want you to remember this moment. I want you to remember that you called me princess, and I want you to remember that you were wrong about me." Then she turned and walked out of the diner. Marcus didn't respond. He didn't know what to say. But something in Sarah's calm certainty, in the way she had spoken without anger or defensiveness, had shaken him in a way that all her silence never had. Sarah left Millbrook the next week. As she drove away in her old Honda Civic, heading toward Naval Base Great Lakes and everything that came next, she made herself a promise. She would become a Navy SEAL. She would prove everyone who doubted her wrong. And she would do it with more strength and grace than they deserved. Naval Base Great Lakes in North Chicago was Sarah's first taste of what it meant to be part of something bigger than herself. The base sprawled across 1,400 acres, and from the moment she arrived, Sarah understood that nothing about her life would ever be the same. Basic training was brutal. It was designed to be brutal. Recruits were pushed to their physical and mental limits every single day. Wake-up calls came at 4:30 in the morning. Marching drills, weapons training, swimming, rope climbs, and endless running filled every hour of daylight. Sarah threw herself into it with complete commitment. She was one of only 3 women in her training group of 80 recruits. The other 2 women dropped out within the first 3 weeks. When the drill sergeant, a massive man named Petty Officer Anderson, asked Sarah if she wanted to quit like her sisters, she looked him straight in the eye and said, "No, sir. I'm just getting started." Anderson's expression didn't change, but something in the way he nodded at her after that moment suggested he had noticed something. Determination. Real determination. By the end of 8 weeks, Sarah had lost 19 pounds of body fat and gained muscle definition she didn't know was possible. More importantly, she had earned the respect of her fellow recruits. She was quiet, but her work ethic was undeniable. She helped other recruits who were struggling. She didn't complain. She didn't make excuses. When basic training ended, Sarah received orders to report to Naval Station Norfolk in Virginia for advanced training. She was going to become a naval corpsman, a medic. This was a crucial step in her plan. Navy SEALs needed to be trained in advanced medical skills. If she could prove herself as a corpsman, she would be one step closer to her real goal. Norfolk was a different kind of challenge. The Navy is a hierarchy built on respect earned through knowledge and performance. Sarah was a quiet woman from a small town, and she was training to work alongside some of the toughest sailors and Marines in the military. She excelled in the medical training. She had an aptitude for anatomy and physiology that surprised her instructors. She was detail-oriented, precise, and calm under pressure. These weren't personality traits she had cultivated for show, they were simply who she was. And in a field where lives depended on quick, accurate decisions, those qualities mattered more than anything else. 18 months into her service, Sarah was assigned to work with a Special Operations Unit at Naval Base San Diego. This was it. This was the moment that changed everything. San Diego was where the Navy SEALs trained and operated. Sarah knew that if she was going to make this transition, this was where it would happen. She was 20 years old, a skilled corpsman with an impeccable record, and she had the physical ability to attempt the most grueling training course in the entire American military. But there was a problem. The Navy had strict regulations about women in combat roles. In 2015, when Sarah enlisted, women were still officially banned from serving in direct combat positions. But things were changing. Policy was shifting. And there were people in the special operations community who believed that if women could meet the same standards as men, they should have the opportunity to try. Sarah's commanding officer, Captain James Morrison, was one of those people. Morrison had seen Sarah work. He had watched her provide medical support to his operators. He had noticed that she was smarter, tougher, and more dedicated than most of the men who came through his unit. One day, he called her into his office. "Mitchell," he said, "how serious are you about becoming a SEAL?" Sarah's heart stopped. "Sir, I'm more serious than I've ever been about anything." Morrison leaned back in his chair. "What you're asking for isn't impossible, but it's not easy either. The regulations are changing, but there's still a lot of resistance. A lot of people don't want women in the teams. And if you try, you're going to face opposition you can't even imagine right now. You understand that?" "Yes, sir, I do," Sarah said. "If you fail," Morrison continued, "people are going to use it as ammunition against every other woman who tries this. You'll be a cautionary tale. But if you succeed..." He paused. "If you succeed, you'll open a door that's never been opened before. Are you willing to carry that weight?" Sarah nodded. "Yes, sir. I am." The 6 Marines had names: Captain Derek Chen, Lieutenant Marcus Walsh, Sergeant First Class Tom Brennan, Sergeant James Cooper, Corporal Keith Hastings, and Lance Corporal David Roth. They were assigned to work with Sarah's Corpsman unit as part of an integrated medical and tactical training program. All 6 men were combat veterans. All 6 men had been to Iraq or Afghanistan. All 6 men made it immediately clear that they didn't want Sarah there. It started with comments. Small things designed to undermine her confidence. "You sure you can handle the weight of that medical pack?" Captain Chen asked while they were loading gear for a training exercise. "You probably shouldn't do that lift, Mitchell," said Sergeant Brennan. "Women tend to have weaker cores. I don't want to see you get hurt." The comments were dressed up in concern, but Sarah understood what they really were: doubt. Disrespect. The kind of cruelty that wears a friendly mask. She responded to every comment the same way. She didn't argue. She didn't cry. She simply did the work better than anyone else on her team. During a training exercise in the California mountains, Sarah was assigned to carry the heaviest medical kit while keeping pace with the 6 Marines over a 15-mile course. Halfway through, Lance Corporal Roth deliberately kicked a rock into her path, trying to make her stumble. She didn't stumble. She kept running, kept her pace, and finished the course 2 minutes faster than any of them. "Lucky," Sergeant Cooper said when she finished. Sarah just nodded and started preparing the medical equipment for the next phase of training. Over the next 6 months, the harassment escalated. One time, they filled her locker with ice. Another time, they told her that a mandatory morning training session had been moved up 2 hours. It hadn't been, but she showed up anyway at the new time, wasting hours of her morning. They questioned her medical decisions in front of other soldiers. They made comments about her appearance. They questioned whether she was being given special treatment because she was a woman. Sarah never complained to her commanding officers. She didn't ask for help. She didn't make excuses. Every single day, she showed up and did her job better than the day before. But something else was happening too. Something darker. The 6 Marines had begun to take their harassment beyond verbal intimidation. During a combat simulation exercise, Lance Corporal Roth deliberately struck Sarah during a training drill when he thought no one was looking, leaving a bruise on her ribs. During another exercise, they sabotaged her equipment, removing crucial items from her medical kit so she would fail the training scenario. Sarah knew what they were doing. She documented everything carefully. She took photographs of her injuries. She made detailed notes of every incident with dates and times. She didn't tell anyone, though. Not yet. She was gathering evidence. One evening, after a particularly grueling training day, Sarah was alone in the medical supply room cataloging inventory. All 6 Marines came in. The door shut behind them. "Listen, Mitchell," Captain Chen said, his voice low and controlled. "We need to talk to you about something serious." Sarah's heart began to race, but her face remained calm. "You don't belong here," Chen continued. "You're not a real soldier. You're a token. The Navy brought you in to check a box and make themselves look good. But you're not one of us, and you never will be. These teams," added Sergeant Brennan, stepping closer, "are built on brotherhood. On trust. You can't be part of that. You can't be a SEAL. And the sooner you figure that out and go back to whatever it was you were doing before, the better it will be for everyone." Sarah looked at each of them in turn. Chen. Walsh. Brennan. Cooper. Hastings. Roth. She studied their faces, memorized the exact way they stood, the exact tone they used. "I understand," she said quietly. "Thank you for being honest with me." What she didn't say was that she was recording every word. Her phone, hidden in her pocket, had captured every bit of what they just said. More importantly, her phone had also been synced to her cloud storage, which meant Captain Morrison had been listening in real time from his office. 24 hours later, the 6 Marines were informed they were being placed on administrative leave pending an investigation into allegations of harassment and targeted intimidation. The investigation took 3 months. Sarah gave testimony. She presented her documentation. She played the recordings. She described every incident, every comment, every act of sabotage. Other soldiers testified that they had witnessed the harassment. Captain Morrison provided statements about the systematic nature of their behavior. The case was airtight. But something unexpected happened. Instead of taking responsibility for their actions, the 6 Marines doubled down. They claimed they were being persecuted for trying to maintain standards. They said the Navy was weak for allowing women into the special operations community. They claimed Sarah had set them up, that she had recorded them without consent as part of a scheme to advance her career. Their defense was picked up by certain political voices who saw the case as a larger battle about the place of women in the military. Some news outlets ran stories about how special ops culture was being destroyed by political correctness. Talk radio hosts debated whether women should be allowed in combat roles at all. Through it all, Sarah remained silent. She didn't do interviews. She didn't defend herself publicly. She simply continued doing her job with the same quiet excellence she had always demonstrated. The Navy's investigation concluded that the 6 Marines had engaged in targeted harassment with the intent to force Sarah out of her position. The investigation also found evidence that they had deliberately sabotaged training equipment and that their conduct violated multiple military regulations and laws. But here's where the story took an unexpected turn. The 6 Marines didn't face the kind of consequences that many people would have expected. Instead of courts-martial and significant jail time, they received administrative punishment. Captain Chen was demoted and discharged. The others received demotions, suspensions, and reassignments. It was technically justice, but it felt incomplete. The men who had conspired to break Sarah, who had harassed her, who had tried to drive her out of the military, were walking away with their lives relatively intact. Many of them would go on to high-paying private security jobs. Chen's father was a wealthy businessman who hired him immediately after his discharge. Sarah was devastated, but she hid it. She had learned long ago how to hide her feelings, how to turn disappointment into fuel. What she didn't know was that Captain Morrison had a different plan. Morrison had documented everything the 6 Marines had done. More importantly, he had documented what happened after the investigation. He had noticed that several of them had violated terms of their discharge by taking jobs with defense contractors while under investigation for their conduct. He had noticed inconsistencies in their statements to investigators. Morrison went to the Naval Criminal Investigative Service with everything he had. He didn't do it for Sarah's benefit. He did it because he believed in justice, and he believed that the original investigation had been compromised by political pressure to keep the case quiet. NCIS opened a new investigation. This time, it wasn't just about harassment. It was about whether the men had conspired to commit fraudulent conduct during the military's investigation. It was about whether they had lied to investigators. It was about whether they had violated federal law in their attempts to intimidate a witness. It took another 8 months, but the new investigation concluded what Morrison had suspected. The 6 men had engaged in a conspiracy to intimidate Sarah and cover up evidence of their harassment. They had lied to investigators. They had destroyed communications and evidence. This time, the consequences were different. All 6 were arrested. All 6 faced federal charges including conspiracy, witness intimidation, and falsification of evidence. The case went to federal court in San Diego. Sarah had to testify. She had to sit on a witness stand and relive every moment of harassment, every insult, every act of intimidation. The defense attorneys were brutal. They tried to make her out to be a liar, a manipulator, someone who had orchestrated the entire thing to advance her career. But Sarah's documentation was perfect. Her recordings were clear. Her testimony was precise and unemotional. The jury deliberated for 3 days. Their verdict was guilty on all charges for all 6 defendants. The sentencing hearing took place on a cold February morning in federal court. The judge, a woman named Judge Patricia O'Brien who had spent 20 years on military cases, had harsh words for the defendants. This court finds that the conduct you engaged in represents not just a failure of character, but a fundamental betrayal of the military code, Judge O'Brien said. You took an oath to defend this country. Instead, you conspired to obstruct justice and intimidate a fellow service member. Your actions have brought shame upon the uniform and upon those who serve with integrity. This court has determined that your sentences should reflect the severity of your crimes. Captain Derek Chin received 4 years in federal prison. Lieutenant Marcus Walsh received 3.5 years. Sergeant First Class Tom Brennan received 3 years. Sergeant James Cooper received 2.5 years. Corporal Keith Hastings received 2 years. Lance Corporal David Roth received 18 months. The sentences made national news. Military analysts and policy experts debated the case extensively. Some celebrated it as a victory for justice and for the integration of women into combat roles. Others remained skeptical, continuing to argue that women didn't belong in special operations. But none of that mattered to Sarah Mitchell. What mattered was what happened 3 months after the sentencing. Sarah stood in dress blues in a formal ceremony at Naval Base San Diego. In front of her was Captain James Morrison. In front of him was a large group of Navy personnel, military officials, and members of the press. Petty Officer Second Class Sarah Mitchell, Morrison said formally, you have completed all requirements for qualification as a Navy SEAL. You have demonstrated exceptional courage, dedication, and commitment to the values of this military. You have overcome obstacles that would have broken many soldiers. More importantly, you have maintained your integrity and your honor while facing persecution and intimidation designed to drive you from this path. Sarah stood at attention, her face composed, her eyes forward. It is my honor, Morrison continued, to officially designate you as a qualified Navy SEAL. Welcome to the teams, Petty Officer Mitchell. As the medal ceremony concluded and the photographers snapped pictures, Sarah's thoughts went back to that day at the diner in Millbrook, Pennsylvania. She thought about Marcus Webb sitting there with his father, laughing at her dreams. She thought about all the people who had told her she couldn't do this. She thought about the 6 men who had tried so desperately to prove she didn't belong. They had all been wrong. But Sarah wasn't the kind of person who needed to go back to Millbrook and prove it to them. She didn't need their validation or their respect. She had something much more valuable. She had the knowledge of what she was capable of. She had the trust of the finest soldiers in the world. She had the respect of her brothers and sisters in arms. 2 years later, Sarah was serving in a combat role in Southeast Asia. She was part of a unit that conducted special operations missions. She saved lives. She took risks. She made decisions that mattered. It was everything she had dreamed of. And one day, while she was on leave and back in the States, she found herself driving through Pennsylvania. She didn't plan to go back to Millbrook. She didn't intend to visit her hometown. But somehow, she found herself on the familiar roads, driving past the high school, past the grocery store where she had worked, past the diner. She decided to stop at a coffee shop on Main Street. It was a new place that hadn't existed when she left town. She was sitting with a cup of coffee when a woman recognized her. It was her old guidance counselor, Mrs. Harrison. "Sarah?" Mrs. Harrison said, walking over. "Is that really you? I heard you were in the military, but I didn't know you were back in town." Sarah stood and hugged her. "It's been a long time, Mrs. Harrison. I'm just passing through." "I saw something on the news," Mrs. Harrison said, sitting down across from her. "Something about a Navy SEAL from Pennsylvania. Was that you?" Sarah nodded. "That was me." Mrs. Harrison's eyes filled with tears. "I always knew you could do it. I always believed in you." "I know," Sarah said. "You were the only adult who did." As Sarah was leaving town that evening, she drove past the old Mitchell house. Her parents still lived there. She thought about stopping in, but she knew they were out of town visiting her aunt. Instead, she left a letter in their mailbox. It was short, just a few paragraphs. But in it, she thanked them for giving her the determination to succeed. She told them about her career, about the official recognition she had received, about the fact that she had proven wrong everyone who doubted her. And in the final paragraph, she wrote, "The girl they called Princess has become something better. She's become a soldier that her country trusts with its most important missions. She's become the kind of person who can look anyone in the eye and know that she belongs exactly where she is. Thank you for raising a daughter with that kind of strength." 6 months later, Sarah received an email from Marcus Webb. She almost didn't read it, but something made her open it. The message was simple. "Sarah, I don't know if you'll even respond to this, but I wanted you to know that I saw the news about you. I know what I did to you in high school. I know how I treated you. I was a small man in a small town, and I used cruelty to feel powerful. I've thought about what you said to me that day at the diner more times than I can count. You told me that one day you'd be doing something that mattered while I would just remember that you were right and I was wrong. You were right. I followed my father into business. I made money. But I never did anything that mattered. I watched what you did, how you overcame the persecution and proved yourself, and I realized that you were always the strong one, not me. I'm sorry, Sarah. I'm genuinely sorry for how I treated you. I hope you're proud of what you've accomplished, because the rest of us certainly are." Sarah read the email twice. She didn't respond to it. She didn't need to. The victory wasn't in Marcus Webb's apology. The victory was in the fact that she no longer needed his apology. She had become exactly who she wanted to be, not because she was proving something to him or to anyone else, but because that person was worth becoming. Years later, when Sarah was interviewed by a military publication about her experiences, a reporter asked her what she would say to the young women who felt like she had felt, underestimated, mocked, told they didn't belong. Sarah thought for a moment before answering. I would tell them that other people's doubts are not your burden to carry, she said. I would tell them that the voice that matters most is the voice inside your own heart. I would tell them that every person who told me I couldn't do something was giving me additional fuel to prove them wrong. But most importantly, I would tell them that you're not doing this for them. You're not fighting to earn someone else's respect. You're fighting because the dream is worth fighting for. You're fighting because you know who you are, and that's enough. The girl they called Princess learned that eventually, and that's what made her free.